and we are recording. Thanks for joining us, folks. We have Bill O'Reilly, not the other Bill O'Reilly,
He's
but
taller.
Bill Anti-Congestion Pricing O'Reilly, who heads up an organization called the November Team. Bill has been a guest before, before congestion pricing was implemented, and he's still steadfast against congestion pricing. I am Ardina Seward, and I am joined with my buddy, Ken Rosato, who is also on ON New Jersey. He is an anchor. If you guys are up early, he is on from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And you can also watch the recording, and we are ready to go. So, Bill, President Trump is about to squash congestion pricing. So, what you say about that?
I hope so. I mean, we hear that, but I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen until it happens. And I think it's a positive sign. And I say this not to be partisan. I like the fact that Governor Hochul and President Trump are talking to each other. I mean, it's a good thing. I think she's trying to hang on to some vestige of congestion pricing. We want it pulled out root and branch, and for the same reasons, Adina, as always. While it may work in the zone, it's hurting other zones. But essentially, this has always just been another tax. And you look at the numbers. The New York Post had a story last week just talking about the billions of dollars not collected each year from tolls and fares, and that's where the money is. That's where the money is for construction. But the MTA has to do its job and stop messing around and just trying to come up with easy solutions to everything.
Yeah, if I could jump in really fast, if you look at the numbers that the MTA is down, about $2 billion, and you look at how much they lose from fare evasion, it's about $400 million a year. Let's see. They've been allowing fare evasion since de Blasio. Let's go back 4 years. 4, 8, 12, 13, 5. So it works out almost exactly at the time when de Blasio told the police, do not crack down on fare evaders. And so people were getting onto buses and jumping over turnstiles, not paying. And then guess what happened? Exactly by the amount that they were evading fares is exactly the amount of money they're short. And rather than going to the people using the subways, let's go to the people who have nothing to do with the subways, people driving on the roads who already pay taxes, and let's charge them for our sins of the past.
Isn't math amazing?
Yeah.
Well, it's also, it's a tough issue for blue collar workers. I mean, consider the fact that you have a guy who's making, I don't know, $80,000 a year, and he's got a floral business, a small floral business, and he has to drive all over New York City with that. That is going to add to his cost. That forecasts this guy working on tighter margins, and if he doesn't make those margins, his business is gone. He's null and void. Now, the argument, on the other hand, is made from environmentalists who are saying this is great because there are studies, I don't know where those studies are, claiming that air pollution is down. There are also studies saying that traffic flow is much faster, which is a possibility. But at the same time, what happens to firefighters who now have to ride the subway because it's too much for them to drive their cars to go from point A to point B to point C all over New York City? So
And I was going to say, Ardina, and also it's especially maddening when you look at the facts of it. And I think some of the facts have actually gotten out. It's taken months and months and a couple of years really for things to get out there. But the problem with the congestion in Manhattan was never the commuters, or hasn't been for decades. The number of commuters coming in by car has been going down steadily since the 70s. And what the big difference, and we all know it, is Uber and Lyft and all the ride shares and also the bike lanes of the rest of it. And it's nice to have bikes. I like bikes. People like to ride in bike lanes. But you're going to have there's going to be an effect. I mean, there's always a cause and effect. And we often, like delude ourselves into thinking there won't be this time, but there always is. And so the cause of all the bike lanes and the rest of the street furniture and the rest of what started with the Bloomberg administration is more congestion. But it's not from drivers. It's from Uber and Lyft that are really standing to benefit the most from this. And if you look at the donations to the groups that were running the pro congestion pricing efforts, the biggest donors are Uber and Lyft or ride shares.
Yeah, scratch your head and wonder if there's any link to that. I mean,
Can't be.
yeah, it's New York. Why would that ever happen? Why would there be money in anyone's pocket? You know, what's really frustrating also is the idea that there's such a sentiment of anti-car, because I think the sort of obnoxious upper middle class or upper class Manhattanite looks down on the car travelers, the commuter from out of town. There's such a snobbish attitude from the people I know. In fact, that includes relatives, and they know who they are, whom I've spoken to recently, who live in Manhattan, and there's such condescension. They don't look as at the blue collar or even blue white collar person who has to come in by car because they commute in at 4:30 in the morning. And I want to ask, would you want your 80-year-old mother getting on a subway at 4:30 in the morning? I wouldn't want her getting on the subway on Park Avenue at 4:30 in the morning, let alone some of the areas she'd have to get on in. So let's just face facts. In England, when they had congestion pricing, when they implemented it, they spent 5 years upgrading their tube system, putting in new cars, putting in police everywhere. They cleaned up the whole system. So their mass transit was immaculate. And by the way, they lowered the price of mass transit and they changed it to zone fares instead of one price for the entire city. That helped immensely. Then they implemented congestion pricing, which, by the way, by their admission, worked for the first 8 months and then stopped working. We're in our honeymoon period yet. We don't really know what the next 6-7 months will show. Now, I did mention before we went on that the last 2 or 3 times that I've driven in from New Jersey, yes, traffic was down, but it was also on a Monday or a Friday. Traffic is down on Mondays and Fridays anyway, not Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because Mondays and Fridays, a lot of people work from home.
And the trouble is, a lot of that traffic goes into the Bronx now. It goes in, and that's where the particulate matter from the cars, the asthma rates, and that's by the MTA's own admission. Their own study showed that asthma rates would increase in the South Bronx. So they're doing some remediation efforts, but that's kind of ridiculous to start the fire and then call the fire department. But yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies here. And at the end of the day, I think we'll know something. I mean, what do you guys think in the next 72 hours, a week? It's been going on for so long. But clearly the president has this in his crosshairs. We'll see if he pulls the trigger on it.
Yeah,
I think he has a lot more on the agenda right now, Ardina, right? And Bill, before he's good. But my guess is he works fast.
Russia, Ukraine, Israel, exactly.
Yeah. And then congestion pricing.
but it does look like it's about to be defeated. Now, the thing is, I am curious as to whether it's going to be flat out eradicated or if it's going to be a watered down version of congestion pricing. So, Bill, I'll defer to you. What do you think?
Well, I think the governor will try and have a watered down version because she'll add the water, over time.
That's true.
If they get one crack, it's going to go. If they make it $1, it's going to be 3 next year, 6, 9, 15, 30. I mean,
That's
it's just they invested in the equipment that nobody wanted. It's over $500 million worth of equipment. It's all up on the light poles. They want to use it, and so our thought is, unless you pull this root and branch, they're going to bring it back, and it's just going to be one of those New York. I mean, look what they did pre-election. It's gone. Almost the day after election, it's back. It's just so New York. It's quintessentially embarrassing.
Hey, don't you remember, though, when Biden took over from Trump the first time in 2021, he pulled down all the segments of the wall and started to sell them on a fire sale. Maybe we can get somebody to come in and take all the equipment out and sell it on a fire sale for pennies on the dollar to London. Maybe they could use it. Now, getting back, Bill, if I may, and Ardina, to the particulate matter. You're talking about the pollution. I don't know about you, and I am no environmentalist, but the last time I checked, if I'm cooking in the kitchen, and that's just upstairs from where I am, and smoke goes up, the smoke dissipates. It goes there and here. It does not delineate. It doesn't know, let me stop here. So I don't know about you, but if a car says, I'm going to stop at 60th Street, I don't understand how that particulate matter doesn't float down south of 60th Street. So the idea that the environmentalists are saying, look, the air is better. It could also be that they tested the air when we had excessive winds over the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's sort of, talk about anecdotal. These are the people who talk about follow the science. I think they're a little silly about that.
Well, also, what's amusing about that study, if you will, is that they're testing now in a time which is pre-allergy season. So I would like to hear, if the congestion pricing plan is not defeated, I'd like to see some studies that are done come April when the plants are starting to bloom, and all of a sudden you have all these particulates combined with the alleged blowback from car pollution. And it doesn't. These particular studies are great. They're fantastic, but a lot of them just don't make sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think, are just designed to to define the benefits of congestion pricing,
Yeah.
which really don't make that much sense.
And Ardina, you touched on something before, and I think Ken, you did as well, which is it seems, and I'm saying this without judgment, but it seems like the progressive environmentalists that are in office, they're so far out ahead of the public. And here's another example of it, like even with the battery farms and the rest of the stuff, they're putting them in locations near backyards and that type of stuff. They're so set on their deadlines, 2030, everything's going to be carbon free, or 2040, or whatever the date is. They're so unrealistic, but they're not bringing along the public. And I'm, like you can, I'm no great environmentalist either, but I care about the environment. I love nature and the rest of it. And I want to, I think we should move in that direction, but people have to be brought along. It's got to be explained to them. It's got to be, and they have to be able to push back and argue it and compromise, but we're not seeing that now. It's just one side that's rigid and the other.
So eloquently put. That's that you've just defined how I feel. Nobody wants to live among dirt and squalor. When I see somebody throw something out their car window, I want to run up and throw it right back in. I'm with you 100%. But there's no one also wants to see an inorganic, artificial means of pushing things on people. China, being a communist country, when they implemented the electric cars, I don't know if you read about this, Ardina, if you saw this, because I thought we might have talked about this. What they did was, instead of because they don't have competition, they're not a capitalist country. So they came up with one battery, a prototype battery for all the electric vehicles. And now, instead of going to a gas station and getting gas, what happens is you pull up, they pull out your dead battery, they pop in the new prototype, which is pre-charged, and off you go. It's like getting a pre-filled tank of methane or gas for your barbecue grill, I think, right? And that's perfect. That works great. But to do what we're doing and have this cockamamie 500 types of batteries, we don't have anywhere for the batteries to go when they're used up. We haven't even discussed that. Wait 5 more years when those lithium batteries are used and can't be recharged. We don't have a clue where we're going to put them. And right now, only about 2% of all the cars are electric. So you're right. They put the cart before the horse, hoping that everything would then catch up. But I don't see it catching up.
Yeah. Well, I think the bike lanes, which also may bite the dust if Trump has his way on congestion pricing, are also issues. I mean, they basically narrowed the navigable corridors in New York City. They also are underutilized in certain boroughs where people just don't ride bikes, and they're hazards for delivery people. Now, I mean, the environmentalists are going to come up and say, well, we still need bike lanes. Why do you need bike lanes that are clogged with snow in the wintertime and are blocking deliveries into delis and daycare centers and homeowners? I mean, how does that work?
Right, and you have the path on the Hudson. I mean, that's magnificent. Mm-hmm. What's happened? That goes back to Ruth Messenger, who was a liberal Democrat in New York and a borough president, Manhattan borough president many years ago, and she came up with this waterfront plan, and kudos to her, because you can ride into Westchester from Manhattan. I mean, it's crazy, all along the west side, but you don't need it in every little street. You just don't. And the bike people have frankly become so obnoxious, and they're very activist, and they have money.
Hey, I got an idea. You want to raise money, MTA? Here's a perfect idea. See all these hundreds of thousands, and by the way, I have this little character I created because one of my husband's relatives, I hope he doesn't watch this, he lives on the Upper West, makes close to $1 million, wife makes close to $1 million. They live very happily. In fact, Ardina, they live right by Channel 7, the old Channel 7. Just, ironically, right?
You know the neighborhood very well.
Well, I always like to say that he and his wife get on their little bicycle, and my little bicycle. Here's a guy who can take any means to work. And I said, this guy is an investment banker downtown. He puts on a suit on a 90-degree day, gets on his little bicycle, shows up stinky and sweaty. And I mean, is that a way to present yourself as a professional? Right. Oh, ching, ching, ching. You got to have the little bell on the bicycle, make sure everybody gets out of the way. Look, there's a place and a time. You want to ride your bike. Manhattan is a magnificent Wonderful city to look around and explore.
Yep.
On the edges with a bicycle. God bless you. Have fun. I agree. It's wonderful. But you're right. Every little street, no, ridiculous. Not to mention, 90% of the time, I don't know about you, they don't use the damn bike lane. They're in the middle of the street. So here's my solution.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? You want to ride a bike in Manhattan, you got to get a license. You got to get a bike license.
Well,
and the bike, if you own the bike, you got to get it registered. And you have to get insurance, because how many injuries have there been for people with bicycles hitting
Yes.
people on the street? So
Yes.
you need to carry insurance. I guarantee you insist on insurance, licensing, and registration, you'll watch bicycle usage go down. Or you insist that if you don't use the bike lanes that we have provided for billions of dollars for you, you morons, I'm sorry, you individuals, my morning loudness is coming out, excuse me. If we catch you out of the bike lane, you get a $50 fine. Catch you a second time, you get a $500 fine. The bike lanes are there for bikes, the car lanes are for cars. Let's try imposing the rules on bike riders that they impose on car drivers. And let's see how long that'll go.
I like it, Ken. And also a lot of the bikes, they're doing the electric bikes now, the city bikes, the electric ones. Those are not, I mean, I ride a scooter. I've got a big one. I've ridden the electric bikes. They're not, you don't just jump on there and figure it out in a second. It's like there's a learning curve to those. And if you're going to do a learning curve driving through Manhattan traffic, like, what?
Excellent point.
I mean, Ken and I, for years, just we did that, and I want to mention an anecdote. Ken was not the reporter there, but we had a press conference with Mayor Bloomberg at the time, who was announcing these new wonderful bike lanes, and in the middle of the press conference, a fire truck is sounding the horn in Times Square, blaring. And why was that? Because the fire truck could not get through because of the bike lane. And Bloomberg had to pause the press conference because nobody could hear him because of the noise of the fire truck. And one enterprising reporter said, "Bike lanes, Mr. Bloomberg," and he had no comment. But I mean, that's just a small example of the obstacles that these things present. I mean, we all want a cleaner, more habitable environment, but it has to come with some rules that work for everyone, not just for people who ride bikes.
Yep.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate here for a quick second. That's a weird segue, right? But I want to play devil's advocate for a quick second. If there is a way to placate everybody, is there a place for minimal congestion pricing? Is there a way to have congestion pricing so that there are some benefits for the MTA and that everybody is happy?
Yeah. If I could jump
Go
in,
ahead.
or you want
Ken,
to jump
please,
in?
yeah.
I was going to say, here's my solution. Number one, go after the people who are actually the ones costing and who would benefit, the subway riders. Maybe having a zone system as opposed to a one price for going from Tottenville, Staten Island to the Bronx. Maybe that's not something that should work in 2025. That was a great concept in 1904, not really so much today. That's number one. Number two, you want to cut overhead with the MTA, the womb to the tomb healthcare system that you give somebody who's worked 15 years with the MTA or 20 years, and then they live to be 100. When they originally came up with taking care of them for life, that was when the models showed that people live to be 68 on average. Today they don't. They live to be 100. Years ago when you had Willard Scott on the Today Show, he would do the centenarian of the day because it was so rare. Today, if you don't live to be 100, it's considered unusual. So you can't necessarily let somebody work from 20 to 40 and then pay them bennies for the rest of their lives. Sorry, it doesn't work out. It's not sustainable. And I know that side of the aisle loves to use the word sustainable. It's not sustainable. So those are things. So here's the solution. Reduce the zone to a much tighter zone in the middle. Reduce the price. Instead of $9, which is ridiculous, freeze it at $3 for 10 years. Doesn't go up. All right, those are two things. And number three, you raise the subway fare to $5 and make it an incremental zone system. You do those three things, watch what happens.
I think first they should even start working with the MTA board. One of the ironies of the people who make the decisions about the subway fares is, number one, a lot of them are in the upper tier of income. Also, the average board member is paid, I think, something like $75,000 a year. I may have that. That even may be on the low end. But the fact that you have the majority of the board members who, number one, don't ride the trains, they are white collar professionals, they arrive at these meetings in chauffeur driven cars, and they are paid to compound everything. The MTA could save probably in excess of $1 million a year if they just cut the salaries of the board members, who frankly don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, if they collected fares, they could pick up. It's Ken. That number is actually it's now 700 million on the subway fares, and then when you throw in the cars and the tolls, it's over. It's I think it's 2.5 billion or something, or three. They just did a new study on it. It's just crazy. I don't think like I'm a total no on allowing any congestion pricing, because you give them an inch, they take a mile. Just that simple slippery slope thing, which is always a maddening rationale, but I believe in it. But the other thing is, let Trump bail New York out for one. I mean, New York has been giving 85 cents. We get back 85 cents on the dollar, 80 cents on the dollar from Washington forever. Like, let the federal government take care of this 15 billion that they need to raise over time, and be done with it. Because you're never going to fix this system until the MTA goes top to bottom and looks what's like, the union benefits, the track mile costs, it's just one thing after another with the MTA. It is the worst run agency in America, and it's got to be looked at. But that said, I don't think congestion pricing is going to save it. I think it's just going to, keep it on the tee.
Hey, I just got a Trumpism. A Trumpism just sparked into my head. How about a deal? Now that Eric Adams is his best bud, how about you cut this deal? New York City dumps sanctuary city status and cooperates with the feds, and the feds bail out New York City's MTA.
That's brilliant. That's actually a great idea, Ken.
I'm glad we just solved all the problems of the world. I got to go take care of Israel right now. Bye. I mean, now somehow this will get to him. Don't be surprised if in 2 weeks you hear about this.
Oh, absolutely.
But you have to wonder, and this again is the I guess the skeptic in me, that if Trump always works with a quid pro quo, you have to wonder that if Governor Hochul caves and says, okay, we're going to do away with congestion pricing, does she have any political pull against Trump if she concedes? I mean, how do you think that's going to work? Because in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, something, this isn't, okay, the congestion pricing, by the time we talk again, will be a done deal.
Yep, one way or the other. Yep.
But you got to figure that there's something in the backroom deals that's going to replace it. So does anybody have any speculation on what that is?
He'd have to come up with money. It would have to be money, and I think part of what's slowing this down is that Congressman Mark Molinaro, former Congressman Mark Molinaro, is going into that. Looks like he's taking that key transit slot, and
right.
he needs to be sworn in before all the good things can happen. But I think that's where they're moving towards, is undoing it. But they're going to have to give New York money, and it's not that New York deserves it. We don't deserve it. We've been squandering it. But to keep the transit system running, we're going to have to get an infusion of cash.
Well,
so you think,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Ardina. Forgive me.
You think that if that's the case, do you think there's going to be a tighter scrutiny on the MTA?
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping the exchange is like a full MTA audit for this one bailout.
That could be kind of scary.
Remember Trump had said that he wants to shut down a number of federal buildings and eliminate a number of federal positions. And one of the things on his list was to potentially take about 70% of the federal buildings that are mostly empty and costing the federal government a fortune to operate every year, consolidate the numbers of people still working into a few buildings and sell off the rest. Well, Manhattan is home to about $3 billion of federal real estate. How about you take that federal real estate, donate that to the city from the federal government, let them sell it off, and there they get their money. That's another means.
The solutions keep coming.
Yeah. We need to sit on Doge.
That's good, actually. That's right.
Now, does your group get involved in bike lanes at all?
No, so the congestion pricing groups are very loosely put together because they're real people, and so it really is a coalition of lots of like many hundreds of people that are really active against this. So I started working with one organization and then helping others as they came in, just kind of pro bono, and because it's all really one effort. There are some members of a group called New Yorkers Against Congestion Pricing Tax that are split off, and they're going after the electric bikes.
The electric bike.
They don't want them in the parks. People are getting hit. They want more regulations. They want licensing, as Ken mentioned. They're pushing there. So in the beginning, they're beginning to get out there and make some noise.
Well, part of the problem with the electric bikes is that a lot of them are the faux Uber delivery drivers, and
Exactly.
there's a big problem with undocumented persons. I mean, they're not able to get working papers, so they're become delivery people, and they're taking up these bike lanes, and they are hazardous drivers. I mean, partially because they speed, partially because they don't understand our traffic laws, and partially because they frankly don't care.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there any movement on that? I mean, I know it's kind of out of your
Well,
boundaries.
in the bike conversation, like ebbs and flows. If you remember, and I think Ken, you were probably at ABC then, and you may have been too, Ardina, was when Andrew Aristoff, who was a former city council member, former treasurer of New York State and New Jersey, was running for city council. He was down by 8 points because I was working on his race. And the big issue on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which is where the district was, it was District 4, was bikes on the sidewalk. Like delivery people were hitting little ladies, young people. It was bad, and people had gotten killed, and it was happening a lot. And we went through all these things, and actually, Aristoff got he got elected because he told someone to get off the sidewalk the weekend before the election. He got punched in the head. His sister was thrown to the ground. She got injured. He had to be rushed to the hospital, plastic surgery, and Mayor Dinkins had to come in to visit with him, and he ended up winning by 57 votes. So he'd been down 8 points. But it was the bike issue. So it comes and it goes, and there's some progress and then it goes away. He had DOT put stencil in like this material on sidewalks, no bikes, like bicycle with a cross through it. That lasted about 7 years, and the weather just wore them away. Mm-hmm. So like we make progress and then it falls back. We make progress and it falls back. But I think it's the battery bikes that are changing the nature of things a little bit, because they can really shoot out at you and get away quickly. And so I think that's making it a problem again.
They've caused a lot of fires too.
And the fire, you can't put them out.
They're totally unregulated. I want to defer a second to my colleague here, Ken, mm-hmm. Who is active in New Jersey news. What kind of feedback have you gotten from the New Jersey side regarding congestion pricing? And I'll fill it to Bill.
Yeah, Bill and Ardina, the funny thing about it is no matter what side of the aisle you are politically in New Jersey, we have Congressman Gottheimer, who's a Democrat, right? Mainstream Democrat. They're all against it because, it causes problems for us. It's hard in terms of mass transit, especially in off hours, to get from New Jersey to Manhattan. You have the PATH trains, but they have cutoff times. You have New Jersey Transit, but they have cutoff times. And you have express buses. But there's this desert time between about 12:30 in the morning and, say, 4:45 in the morning. If you need to get into Manhattan for work, if you miss that last bus or whatever, that express bus at 12:30 in the morning, you can't get in. You have to pay for an Uber. Or drive. So there really is no other way to get in. It's not like there's a 24-hour subway. There was discussion once, you may recall, of having the 7 train come onto the PATH tracks and come into New Jersey and offer, the extension of the subway and let that take people in. That would have been a great idea. At least it's something. And I think a lot of New Jersey people would have been happy. But right now, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in New Jersey on either side of the aisle who'd be happy. Now, Governor Murphy never saw money he didn't like. So I'm sure if the MTA said, Governor Murphy, we'll give you $1 billion a year, and then you just say yes, Governor Murphy would look the other way with that wonderful white hairstyle of his, and he would say, I think we're for congestion pricing now. Yes, we're all for it. So that's my Governor Murphy impersonation in 2 seconds. So I think that could change things. But right now, everybody in state government, left or right, is against congestion pricing in New Jersey.
Yeah. I mean, New Jersey had an ad. I don't know if you both saw it last week. That basically it was a TV spot, and the message was basically, "Why go to New York? You can work
Yeah.
in New Jersey." That should send chills up the spine of the governor of New York, the mayor of New York, because that's correct. You don't have to come into New York anymore.
Well, that raises the other question. Now, I don't know if you have, it may be too early in the game to have gotten feedback from theaters, the theater managers, but early on when they talked about congestion pricing, there was a concern that people coming in from New Jersey, people coming in from Westchester County, driving their cars into the city to see a Broadway show are going to say, you know something, forget about it. I will go to theater in New Jersey. I will go to a theater in Westchester. So are there any stats on that so far?
Nothing yet. I think it's too early, but I had wondered, and this is more long term thinking, whether you'll see theaters pop up uptown. Why not put up a theater on 125th Street or on 86th Street?
Wow.
Like, why not?
Because then they'll just extend congestion pricing to 125th.
That's
you know
why.
New York. That's what they're going to do. Wherever you know that it's not going to stay at 60th Street. Give it 5 years. It's going to go up to 125th, and then it'll go.
Yeah.
It'll be in Tottenville in about 10 years. I promise.
Exactly.
It gets crazy, and I think the answer is not about charging more confiscatory taxes. It's about doing more with less. How about you take a look at your expenses and figure out where the holes in the Titanic are and try to fix that before you go and hat in hand and say we need more money. I recall, and Ardina, you and I had this conversation years ago in the live truck when we were in Channel 7 together. I remember I think it was like 2003, maybe 2004. One of those years, the MTA actually had a $1 billion surplus,
Yes.
something they didn't anticipate, right? Now, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who worked on Wall Street. I said, this is magnificent. And he said a $1 billion surplus that was not expected is as bad as a $1 billion deficit because it shows mismanagement. You should be able to predict to within a very finite, small amount how much you're going to make. And if you're $1 billion off, you don't know what you're doing. And that said everything to me. From that point on, I looked at the MTA very suspect.
Yeah.
Well, you have to wonder too that if Trump does away with civil service, that's really going to change the game, for the MTA. It's really going to change the game for employees. Then what's going to happen? How are we going to manage that?
I think it's going to be a lot of court cases. I think
A lot of court cases, exactly.
a lot of court cases coming in. Yep.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch upon is that there is a hue and cry now up in Dykeman complaining about the number of cars that have come in and taken up neighborhood spaces.
Yeah.
Because everybody now is saying, something, I'm not going to pay the congestion toll. I'm going to park my car as close to the city line as I can, and then I'm going to take a train from there. So you're talking about neighborhoods in Inwood, Washington Heights, which already had parking issues, which are now compounded by people commuting and saying, I'm going to park my car wherever I can find near Dykeman, and then I'm going to take a train in. And there was even the beginning of a petition to have residential permits to park in that area because the residents' parking spaces are getting taken up by people coming in from out of the neighborhood, which is crazy. I mean, it's made a bad situation worse, where we're being squeezed now.
Yeah, and Ardina, I think that's why the federal government didn't require a full environmental impact review on this. Mm-hmm. Was we were going to find out things like that. I mean, I don't know if when I was on the last show with you both, I'm not sure if I told you the story, but up in Westchester, there's a beautiful little farm called Muscoot Farm. It's a little place in Somers, New York. And when Rob Astorino was the county executive, he decided to rename it for the guy who saved it. It was Al Del Bello, a former county executive. So he went to rename the park, had to go through a full environmental, a secret, whatever process that took 1.5 years to put up a new sign. That required that process, and congestion pricing didn't. I mean, it's just insane how they forced this thing through. And had they not, they would have discovered things like Dykeman Street or Washington Heights getting crushed with the traffic, or the South Bronx getting hit with particulate matter, or Brooklyn getting hit with backup traffic, or the 59th Street Bridge being a complete disaster of not knowing which way to turn when you get off. Like, these things would have come up, but they didn't. They forced it through quickly, and this is what happens.
Yeah. You know, I had a conversation years ago with our former governor. Let's see, I don't want to say his name, but let's just say he has vision issues. Okay, and that without saying who he is, you know which governor.
And everybody loves him.
And everybody loves him, no matter
Everybody.
what side of the aisle you're on. He's
Everybody.
a super sports fan too, amazing person. And we were at the Carnegie Deli actually with our dear friend Ardina, Bill Evans. So I'm giving every detail but the name, right? And I remember having lunch with this man. He actually walked over to us because he heard our voices and he could see a little peripherally. Anyway, he came and sat down, and one of the things I brought up to him was, I said, you know, it would be so much better in Manhattan and you would have so much less traffic if 500,000 cars didn't try to converge on 3 tunnels and bridges to get over into Jersey. If you had 6 or 9 to spread out the traffic, you would have so much less traffic. And he smiled and giggled. He said, you know how many times that's been brought up? And I said, so what's the deal? He said it was even brought up by private investors who said they would put up billions of private income. They would put that up and make those private tunnels and charge people $30 to cross, knowing people would pay it to avoid the traffic. The problem is the environmentalists, the community activists would fight so hard that it would take 100 years. He said it'll never pass.
Yeah.
And it's like Manhattanites are just damned because of that, because of the activism run amok. Do I say you shouldn't have people concerned with the environment? No, you need people to be watchdogs. But years ago, that used to be the media, and unfortunately, they've all fallen asleep.
Yeah, if you remember the Westway, the West Side Highway, I think it was the darter snail or the snail darter that killed that, I think. Yep. Yeah, darter snail. That
would have doubled the West Side Highway, right? Because it was supposed to extend out into the Hudson River. But they said because of this snail that is actually more of a problem, more of a blight on the waterfront than anything else, that for whatever reason that prevented all of the traffic flow and causes all the problems we have now.
Yeah, yeah. But they got bike paths.
With no environmental impact study.
Right.
So,
amazing.
There was an interesting post on Facebook a couple of days ago where somebody it was a sort of an argument between an anti-congestion person and an anti-congestion person and a pro-congestion pricing person. And one person said, well, you know, the plan's going to get defeated. And the pro-congestion person said, well, you know something? The plan may get defeated this time, but in 3 or 4 years, it's going to come back again and we will win. So it looks like, Bill, this is not going to go away. So what is the long-term strategy of your group to be able to continue fighting this? Because that person, the pro-congestion person, may have been right, that they're not going to go away. They're going to keep fighting.
Oh, yeah.
What's the strategy of your group to also keep fighting?
Yeah, it's constant vigilance and that, but often the group, like our groups, will disband and then have to reassemble later on because there's not unlimited money to run it, and you just need resources. You don't need gazillions, but you need some resources to organize and have a little bit of staff. So yeah, I think it's just when it pops up, go after it. They've been pushing this since the 50s in New York, and even talked about it in the 40s.
50s?
Yeah, so they've been talking about it, and they try every once in a while, and it comes and it goes. And I agree, Ardina, it'll come back, but we'll just have to be ready for it. I mean, 2 years ago when we started, fighting this because we saw it coming, nobody was talking about it, and it takes a lot in New York to gin up momentum. But once you get it, New York has an explosiveness of its own in its news cycles that can actually change things. So when it comes up, we'll go after it again. We'll hit it again. Just keep it. But the pressure has to be on the MTA to run the agency right. That's the trouble. We're giving them enough money. We're giving them more than enough money. They're just not running it.
Is it? Do you think part of the problem with the MTA is that it's not really run by one person? It's a few people appointed by the governor, a few people appointed by the mayor, So because of that, not one person has really ultimate authority
or responsibility. Right. Exactly.
Well, it's kind of basically when you look at it as a kind of laissez-faire agency. There doesn't seem to be any real tight controls, because for years Ken and I both covered the MTA press conferences and the fare increases, and with every fare increase there was this expectation of better services, subways that don't flood, improved security, more cops, and something, and it never really happened the way it should have happened. It just didn't happen, and you sort of scratch your head and say, well, where did the money go?
There's also, like, Ardina, there's that famous story that's so often cited about the cost per track mile for New York. That it's, that our track mile is 7 times, to put in a mile of track in New York, costs 7 times the most expensive other city in the world, which is Paris.
Right.
So everybody's below Paris, and we're 7 times Paris. And we seem to just accept that as it's New York. And that can't stand. I mean, that's like union stuff. That gets very tough politically. Like, both parties will get jumpy over those union issues, because there's a lot of voters involved, a lot of MTA, a lot of transit workers. But there's a lot of money going out there that doesn't go out there in other cities, and we're just going to have to look at it, and it's going to be very uncomfortable.
And along those lines, I mean, even a perfect example with the track miles, the cost to build roadways is 5 times in the New York tri-state, 5 times the cost per mile than anywhere else in the country as well.
Wow.
So why? I mean, I understand
Why?
people here get paid more, but not 5 times more. When I worked at Channel 7, I got paid more than when I worked in Miami. I used to work at CBS in Miami, but I didn't get 5 times. It would have been nice to get 5 times more. So it doesn't add up, and eventually that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's coming from us. That's part of the problem. And just to bolster your argument as well, and not that you need me to, Bill, but just to point out,
could use it.
when you had said, Bill had said that, if you start out with any congestion pricing, it's just a matter of time when it goes up. And just to bolster that, take a look at the tolls. The tolls to cross the Lincoln Tunnel that started out as 25 cents that are now $16. It just keeps creeping up, especially with something like Easy Pass, which you don't feel, because as you just drive through, it debits off your credit card, and you don't even notice when they have. I didn't even know a couple of months ago that there was another increase. It's like up a $1.50 more to cross from New Jersey into New York. But that's the way they do it. And you're right. If it started out at $2, it would be $9 in a couple of years anyway. Aren't there already built-ins? Isn't it supposed to be going up to 15 in a few years anyway right now?
Yeah, and then on the congestion pricing, they have something where if they think it's overly congested one day, they can up it by up to 25%.
Like
for
surge
that
pricing.
hour or two. The surge pricing, exactly. Yeah, just mad. But but also in New York is you can now get a speeding ticket without getting stopped.
Right.
Like, you could be on 84 and they pick you up by a camera, and it's like, and that really kind of Big Brother freaks me out.
I mean, that violates the whole constitutional argument of being able to confront your accuser in court. This is a camera. A camera's not a human, especially in the deep fake era. Who knows? If the city wants to make money, you get somebody who deep fakes all. We don't know. You're driving to work. You don't know if you were going 31 into 25. How do you know?
Right. No idea. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Well, one last point that I want to make is that there also seems to be a disconnect between subway car production. Kawasaki is in Yonkers, which is just a stone's throw from New York City. But at night, you see the Kawasaki rail cars, which are made in Yonkers, being transported all the way over to northern Manhattan, the tip of northern Manhattan, to the rail yards, where the car just kind of sits there, as opposed to some quick transport to connect where they need to connect. There's a storage yard. I mean, I have seen them. The first time I saw it, it was crazy. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's this huge huge subway car being transported down Main Street in South Yonkers. I mean, all you can say to yourself is, thank God, I wasn't drinking. It looked like it was something out of a third world transport system. And there's only a portion of cars that are being manufactured in Yonkers. Some are getting farmed out to other parts of the world. So why isn't there some sort of amalgam between the MTA in New York City connecting directly to Yonkers, Kawasaki, and easing the transport and making the transport of cars much faster than this convoluted movement of the car before it finally gets connected to, let's say, 242nd Street?
I'd say follow the money. Follow the money. It's always that, right? Do a little research. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the media today, because the media is just so corporate and so dollar run, and there are so few people left,
Thank you.
they just don't do the investigatory work that they used to. Hey, we have a story here that involves the whole New York tri-state, and it involves transportation. You may have read this, that not long ago, there was a company in Newark, New Jersey, that used to handle easy pass maintenance. In other words, billing, charging fines, etc., for 80% of the United States, right here in Newark. Yet when the contract was bid out a couple of years ago in New Jersey, New Jersey's governor went ahead and said, no, we're not going to give you the contract. We're going to give it to a company that is now headquartered in overseas. It's actually headquartered in Indonesia, and they do business with communist China. And get this, they charged the state of New Jersey $250 million more to do the same job that the Newark company did. So now, if you don't think that that stinks of kickbacks, New Jersey style, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Right, but they want congestion pricing so that we pay for it. How about that?
And also, to your question, Ardina, also, like New York was, I think about this a lot. New York was built, like New York came about because of its infrastructure. Like the express subway train was the great development that catapulted New York forward. The trouble is that we built this infrastructure so early that it's now just, it's old. And, you know, it would be cheaper, like you talked about that train car and how to best move it. We're relying on infrastructure that's 100 plus years old, in some cases, you know, 150 years old. It's easier for the newer cities to snap in place new products.
Exactly.
So it takes New York a lot to undo what's there that served us really well for a long time, but it's no longer modern enough.
Right, and then they want to stick us with a bogus toll to pay for their mistakes.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know about you guys, you're in the city. I'm not. I'm in the suburbs, but I'm in the city enough for work that I've taken the subway a few times. I still don't feel comfortable on the subway, even during daytime. I've seen enough of mental health problems that it concerns me. And I think if they finally got a grip on the mental health issue, the homeless issue, that it would make it more conducive to people spending a few bucks and riding the subway. Years ago, I remember going, when I went to Regis High School in Manhattan, I used to take the subway every day. It was a much different experience than it is today. And I think if they could get back to a point where the subways are clean and safe again, this wouldn't even be a discussion.
There is the problem. There lies the problem, Ken, that a lot of people would not be against congestion pricing if they had the alternative. But the alternative of getting on a train with some crazy person urinating, threatening you with a knife, threatening to kill you in the worst case scenario is daunting.
And she's just talking about me, by the way, Bill.
Well, I guess we are winding down. I guess, Bill, your final thoughts on this issue?
I think the final thoughts are that we may be getting towards the final thoughts. I think, you know, it seems to be there seems to be some type of negotiation going on between the president and the governor, which is great. I love, Ken, your ideas for how to bring it across the line. I think it's good. I think the president is so far out on it that I think he has to kill it. I think he's got to find a way to kill it because he's lining up small successes, and this is going to be one of them. And it's important to him. He's been out there on it. So I think he does it, but New York's going to need some kind of a bailout. Again, we don't deserve it, but we're going to need it to get back. And then you need the audit. You need the big audit on the MTA.
And Mr. Rosato, I'm going to let you take us out.
Well, here's a little quandary for the president. He wants to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency, but yet he wants to use the Environmental Protection Agency to stop congestion pricing. So now it's going to be... He's going to have to impose it first and then cancel it. Once he gets rid of congestion pricing, then get rid of the EPA. Yes, I agree with you. I think that he is in for a penny, in for a pound. And so far, everything he's promised, he hasn't been kidding around. If he says he's doing it, he does it. So the fact that he said he wants to get rid of this big, beautiful congestion pricing plan, he wants to get rid of it. He also says he wants to get rid of bike lanes. I don't know how he's going to pull that off, but if he does that, I think there are a lot of people who'll put him up on a pedestal in bronze. And then other people who want to cast him in bronze, but that's a whole other story. But I really do believe that, look, we love New York. Here, this is the truth, right? We all love New York, and we all agree it is the greatest city on the planet, period. Now, we have a couple of problems, and we're like fraternal and sorority type infighting. Take care of these little spending problems first before you start raising prices for everybody else. We'll fix the problem and make it a much better city.
Exactly.
And with that, we are done. We are over and out. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ardina.
Thank you.